Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the green groups, not just the climate change activists, but green groups generally, how they get themselves into a terrible lather about cutting down sections of forest or even removing trees to put in a highway or trimming trees at the edge of a highway to widen it from one lane to two lanes each direction. These sorts of things. They're always out in force, trying to disrupt, chaining themselves to trees and so on. Now, I'm by the way, one of the people that does think that forests should be looked after. I don't like to see lots of trees cut down. And we live in an area where we back onto a forest, and we like it. We like looking at the trees and being near that sort of natural scenery. Sure as hell better than living in concrete jungles with fucking tower blocks of apartments and so on. But so I've got some sympathy with this. We're also quite sympathetic to protecting local indigenous wildlife. We feel quite strongly about that as well. But there's a couple of things that whereas the Greens are very active in condemn it and they're make these dramatic speeches. What I've noticed that the meetings about protecting forests and the like seem to have a huge overrepresentation of white lesbians for some reason. I don't know why that is. You hardly see any non-white people, and again, I just don't know why. There must be there's some elderly people that feel strong, communist types that feel strongly about the commercial aspects. Big international commercial firms coming in to log the trees, and I do understand that sort of generally. But again, I'd say at least half, if not more, of the people that turn up for these meetings are white lesbians. I just don't understand that. But anyway, and many Jewish ones too. So the issue here is the double standard. Now, there's an area of Sydney that was a very leafy sort of suburb, and it was built up in like the 1920s. So, and there was a major effort even at the time to keep the trees, as many trees as they could. And some of those trees are well over 100 years old, 200 years old plus. And a lot of the trees have grown back since the original building in the 1920s would have occurred. New trees have been planted. And the one thing about, I must say about Australian building, I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but if trees are cut down to, for example, provide access to trucks on a building site, those sorts of things, the first thing that people do when the building is finished is they go and plant trees. So there's this area that, again, was built up in the 1920s, and but it turns out the government turned it into a major bus and train interchange. I think it's the biggest bus train interchange in Australia, for goodness sakes, and as in a suburban one. And so it's now 90% Chinese, Asian, some Indians, but nearly all Chinese have sort of moved in, and there's many entire streets where there are only Chinese people. Whereas now it's an area that I spent quite a lot of time in as a young man. One of the the earlier firms that I worked for was headquartered there, and some of the local sort of restaurants and cafes I used to we used to go and work with my work colleagues. We'd go into to get some lunch or have a coffee or something like that. So, and you'd be hard pressed to see any non-white person. I remember a black person came in, I'd have been early 20s or something, and I remember the shock it caused. And the person was worked at one of the African diplomatic missions in the city or something like that, and that was why they were there. But that was such a rarity. Almost every head turned in this cafe I was in when a restaurant and they walked in. Now these people have also taken over the local councils, so you're hard pressed to see any white people in the local council. They're nearly all Chinese, have been for quite some time. And they take a much broader view of building permits and various other permits than someone else might. So the green groups that had been pretty dominant or prominent, at least in these councils, are now hard to find. The Chinese have managed to sort of kick them out and have an all Chinese council, pretty much anyway. They may have a couple of Caucasian, Anglo-Saxon figureheads in there to make it look good, but they're on the like the mafia payroll, so they do as they're told. So what's happened is this very leafy suburb with lots of trees. You'd be hard pressed to find any trees now. You go down the street, and even whether it's on the the common areas, like the playgrounds, the small forest patches of forest here and there, and in the backyards, the amount of trees that have been cut down is quite phenomenal. And yet these trees, according to the local bylaws and the state laws and so on, are all protected. So it's illegal to cut them down, and the fines are quite substantial, several $1,000s per tree and this sort of thing. And yet somehow, quite remarkably, the councils and the government and the green groups don't want to know. Now, let's suppose the local council, because it's Chinese controlled, they may just looking after their buddies and looking after their diaspora. Yeah, cut down the trees. It's those damn white folks like the trees. We don't like them. And a lot of the Chinese are paranoid about assuming that 100-foot large spiders and snakes and sharks are going to jump out of the tree and eat everybody. So they've got that irrational fear, and they've got a serious fear of spiders. But not that I like spiders either, by the way. But you need to put these things in sort of practical context. But all these trees are getting cut down, and they're being cut down illegally. Now, the green groups could easily create a fuss over this. They could be doing marches and placard wavings as they tend to do. If a white farmer cuts down trees out in a rural area, the green groups will turn up in very well financed and well organized buses and coaches and that sort of thing, and they'll turn up and they'll make a huge fuss with the media obediently in tow. But when it comes to these recent mass migrants coming in and buying up multi-million-dollar properties without being able to speak a word of English, by the way, without seeming to have any job or source of income. They come in and cut down all the trees, and some of the blocks of land were quite big. They were like a third, half an acre, that sort of stuff. So they cut down all these trees, and there's no penalty. I've scoured the court lists of in the local court, and there doesn't appear to be anybody who's being dragged into court for that by the council or by the government or anyone else. The green groups aren't making a fuss. There's no mention of it in the local newspapers. Nothing. You wouldn't even know. I mean, you could see it's happening, but you wouldn't know it. And so, in spite of all the supposed protections in place to protect these trees, there's no one prepared to stand up. And so, why not would be my question. Why do the green groups decide it's only bad when white people do it? But when the mass migrants do it, the brown and the black people do it, then that's okay. Hey, it's all right. Well, no, it's not. And if it's illegal, if one party does it, it's illegal for anyone to do it. And again, we've moved into a world of ideological law. Well, they're brown and black, and the white people are all Hitler. So if Hitler does it, it's bad. But if they do it, it's not so bad because of blah, blah, blah. And so we're into ideological law now, And in ideological law, there's just two sets of law. One law for the white people, who are all Nazis, and one law for the brown people, who are all victims. So this is why I think it's now, it doesn't mean that I've never seen or never heard of this sort of thing happening, where a mass migrant has never been dragged in a court. But wow, it's about as rare as hen's teeth that it happens. So why are the Greens not doing it? Now, the reason the Greens aren't doing it is because it's the same as when the climate change people stopped the Gay Pride March. The forces of political correctness just didn't know what to do. Which victim group do we support? I mean, wow. So it's better to say nothing. And really, they can't condemn the mass migrants because mass migration eradicates the white population. Good thing. So we can't condemn them no matter what they do. And there are other things too. The Chinese and Asians generally, by the way, but the Chinese are love capturing koalas and native marsupials, and then putting them in a cage with a raptor bird or a constrictor snake, and the Chinese guy and his buddies all come over and take bets on this, and I've heard it and seen the terrified screams of the terrified marsupial that's being ripped to pieces by the raptor. And you can hear the Chinese people laughing and enjoying every bit of it. But you go to the local authorities and even give an address and what's happening, and they're not interested. They don't care. But if it was a white person, they'd be onto it quick, smart. So this double standard of law and protection of the environment really needs to be looked at far more closely than it is. You've been with Tassless today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.